again, everybody, and welcome to Appointed to Promote Television, where, as always, we are appointed to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we do so in a news-like format designed to expose the lies, deceit, and treachery of the world with truth, justice, and righteousness. And as always, I'm your host, Ed Walsh, happy to be here for what today is going to be our 34th episode of ATP. And I would ask anyone watching today, if you have not, to please hit the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen so that you can stay up to date with all the latest episodes of ATP. Now, in the last few weeks, we have covered the hot button topics of critical race theory and wokeness, where the underlying agenda of these movements is to systematically take anything that stands in their way, and that being democracy, freedom, liberty, Bible-believing Christians, and the author of all of these good things, that would be none other than the God of the Bible himself. And that's exactly where we look to pick things up tonight in our 34th episode, which is simply the war on Jesus. Can God be canceled? So for those of you who may not know the definition of what blasphemy is, let me share it with you here. For the Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines it as the act of insulting or showing contempt or lack of reverence for God. As tonight, we are going to take a look at how society is trying to cancel, dumb down, disrespect, and redefine the Savior of the universe. So where to start? Well, I covered this in a much earlier episode of my program, but I can't help but cover it again, for they are the three most important and clear examples of how the United States is trying to cancel God from society. With number one taking place on June 25th, 1962, when the U.S. Supreme Court declared school-sponsored prayers unconstitutional in the landmark case Engel versus Vitale. Number two, just a year later on June 17th, 1963, the Supreme Court in Abington School District versus Shemp decided to remove the Bible from public schools, also declaring it unconstitutional. And just to complete the hat trick, in 1980, the Supreme Court held in Stone versus Graham that the Ten Commandments were also unconstitutional, which then removed them from school buildings across the nation and later in 2005 from courthouses across the nation. So these were the first three watershed moments in our society in which we canceled God from society by telling him we don't want you in our public schools, our courtrooms, or our government buildings. And no matter whether you're a follower of Jesus Christ or not, it's undeniable to think of what has happened to America in the last 59 years since this travesty, for a cataclysmic implosion of American values. Now, let's fast forward this moral decline and how this war on Jesus escalated in our recent and current society today. And we'll start with a pair of government assaults on God. The first took place on January 4th, 2021, when Representative Emanuel Cleaver from Missouri delivered the opening prayer of the 117th Congress. But he raised many eyebrows in shock by how he completed the prayer by altering the traditional ending of amen. Check it out.
The Lord make his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. May the Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace. Peace in our families, peace across this land, and dare I ask, O Lord, peace even in this chamber, now and evermore. We ask it in the name of the monotheistic God, Brahma, and God known by many names, by many different faiths. Amen and a woman.
Brahma? Amen and a woman? I can only imagine what the God of heaven thought about that abomination of a prayer. And the second came shortly after, on February 25th of 2021, when New York Congressman Jerry Nadler basically told the country God's place in our government.
Whenever a nation's laws no longer reflect the standards of God, that nation is in rebellion against him and will inevitably bear the consequences. And I think we are seeing the consequences of rejecting God here in our country today. And this bill speaks directly against what is laid out in Scripture. Our government, through this bill, is going to redefine what a woman is and what a man is. It can be anyone who identifies in that gender.
Mr. Stubbe, what any religious tradition ascribes as God's will is no concern of this Congress.
Not only do we see those abominations of today, but since 1963, when prayer was first taken out of schools, statistics clearly show there have been 5 negative happenings in the nation's public schools. Those 5 would be: academic achievement has plummeted, including SAT scores, an increase in illegal drug use, an increase in juvenile crime, deterioration of school behavior, and an increased rate of out-of-wedlock births. Who would have thunk it just 59 years ago? And speaking of schools, how about the 9-year-old student and her family who have been fighting Simpson Elementary now for going on 10 months after her teacher told her she was not allowed to wear her Jesus Loves Me mask in school? And in June 2020, amid the violent protests of George Floyd's death, and as countless statues of our greatest American heroes were being torn down before our eyes, far-left writer and activist by the name of Shaun King called for all Jesus statues to come down, saying that Jesus is a tool of white supremacy, and encouraged taking down all imagery, including murals and stained glass windows of white Jesus, his European mother, and his white friends. Moving on to pop culture, Netflix has doubled down on Jesus. First doing so on December 3rd, 2019, by releasing the Brazilian parody film titled The First Temptation of Christ. Now, the synopsis and storyline is so blasphemous that I can't even bring myself to share it with you here today. And secondly, Netflix rang in the new year on January 1st, 2020 with a new television series simply titled Messiah. The synopsis of the series says, a CIA officer investigates a charismatic figure whose followers believe he can perform miracles. He may be a divine entity, or perhaps a dangerous con artist. And so here is the edited trailer for this series to check out for yourself.
He's come out of nowhere and we don't know who he is.
What do we know about him?
He's leading desperate people.
So this is a cult?
We don't know who he's associated with. He could be creating an army. Or he could be leading them to their death.
What are you doing in Syria? Delivering a message. A message for whom? My father. And who is your father?
You get around Syria, Israel, Texas.
It's the nature of my work.
And what is that work?
God's work.
Who do you think he is?
Bigger than what you can imagine.
Now, after seeing that, let me ask you out there, for those of you who know your Bible and the book of Revelation, would you say that this is actually a series designed about the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ? Or is it perhaps a television series about the end times Antichrist? I am happy to announce, though, that Netflix pulled the plug on the series after only 10 episodes. Many feel it is for the several public outcries of blasphemy by both Christians and Muslims alike. So, from TV and movies, let's move over to comic books. For in March 2020, Ahoy Comics released a new comic book series by author and artist Mark Russell, simply titled Second Coming. In this unfortunately acclaimed and controversial graphic novel, God commands Earth's mightiest hero, Sunstar, to accept Jesus as his roommate and to show him how to use his power more forcefully, seeing as he apparently didn't get it right the first time. Meanwhile, Jesus, shocked at how humans have twisted his message over the last 2 millennia, vows to straighten them out. And if that's not bad enough, Ahoy has already followed up things with a sequel, simply titled Only Begotten Son, which was released on December 16th of 2020. Now, think about this, folks. If there was any other religious figure out there today, whether it be Brahma, Buddha, Mohammed, just to name a few, that had movies, TV shows, and comic books made about them, all designed to mock and shame their very life and message here on this earth, I think we would unfortunately know all too well the answer to that question. There would be outrage. But when it comes to Jesus, the gloves come off, and with no apology. And how about moving on to music, where on July 13th, 2018, pop star Ariana Grande released a single from her 4th studio album, Sweetener. And what is the name of this song? That's right, folks. God is a woman, which debuted at number 11 and later reached a peak of number 8. Now, making God, who walked this earth as a man, a woman, can you say blasphemy? And anyone who's reveled in that song has also taken part in that blasphemy. Now, do you think there was any chance that Representative Cleaver, who we saw earlier in our episode, was listening to Ariana Grande's song on his Apple CarPlay on his way into Congress that day? With that disgusting abomination out of the way, let's go to the college-university system. For you may not know this, but most of the colleges in the United States that started over 300 years ago were Bible-proclaiming schools originally. For Harvard and Yale were originally Puritan, and Princeton originally Presbyterian, and once all had rich Christian histories. For Harvard was named after a Christian minister, Yale was started by clergymen, and Princeton's first-year class was taught by Reverend Jonathan Dixon. For Princeton's crest still says in Latin, "Under God she flourishes." But now these very institutions advocate completely godless thinking, as universities across America show a complete disdain for Jesus Christ. A survey by the College Fix finds. For a look at 316 religious classes at major universities across the nation uncovered that for the most part, professors preferred to snub the topic of who Jesus was and what he preached. For of the 316 classes surveyed, only 3 focused exclusively on Jesus, compared to 2 classes on witchcraft and shamanism, yoga and meditation, 3 classes on sex and religion, death and afterlife beliefs, 4 classes on religion and doubt of various conflicts, 5 classes on science, mysticism, and religion, 12 classes on women, gender, and religion, and 14 classes on religion and culture. While major universities in the study offered classes which include spirituality in the modern world, religion and fantasy, the all-popular whores and saints, and don't forget abortion and contraception in ancient Christianity. But no Jesus. But rest assured, all the campuses do offer 4 classes about Islam and 2 about Stalinism. Guys, Jesus? Now, the point of this is not to say that students should be forced to study Jesus. But if this survey highlights anything, it's that they're not even given the option. Meanwhile, the classes that do focus on Jesus or Christianity sidestep his messages and teaching in favor of historical context and critical analysis. The bottom line here is that American universities across America show an outright disregard and disdain for Jesus Christ. Next comes a very well-known symbol of today's world, and that would be the rainbow. Now, despite the many mythical versions of the rainbow over these past centuries, it was New York City resident Gilbert Baker, who was an American artist, gay rights activist, and designer of the rainbow flag in 1978, which has now hijacked the holy symbol as the worldwide recognized symbol of LGBTQ pride. Now, why do I mention this flag? Because it already has an owner with the copyright to it. And that owner would be God. And the most important illustration that the rainbow provides for us is God's grace and grand purpose of redemption to give humanity a chance to start again. For as it says in the book of Ezekiel chapter 1, like the appearance of the rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, so was the appearance of the surrounding radiance. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And where else can we see the glory of the Lord? Why, try on his very own throne in heaven, of which the Apostle John got to see for himself and shared for us in the book of Revelation, chapter 4. Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was standing in heaven, and someone was sitting on the throne. And he who sat there was like a jasper and a sardius stone in appearance, and there was a rainbow around the throne in appearance like an emerald. So God himself, folks, has a rainbow over his throne. His throne, his rainbow. Yet where we first see the rainbow and its purpose takes place in the book of Genesis, chapters 6 through 9, which tells of Noah and his family who had found favor in God's eyes for their righteousness. In Genesis, God had become fed up with mankind's ever-increasing evil ways that was consuming the earth. God chose Noah and his family to carry out the plans of building an ark to save not only themselves, but all of the animal species of the earth. And at the end of these events, God made a covenant with all humankind, setting a rainbow in the sky to serve as a sign of the covenant that he would never again destroy all life with flood waters. It serves as a reminder of God's forgiveness, truthfulness, and that however great the trials are that we endure, God is always good and always faithful. So if you ask me what the real reason is for which the rainbow has been tainted or misused for either simply fables, fantasies, or to represent a lifestyle which counters God's established order, well, I'll answer that for you, but not until I cover the last topic of the war on Jesus. Take Brandon Robertson, who is a gay writer, activist, and minister, best known for his writing and commentary on millennials, social justice, contemplative spirituality, and his work as an LGBTQ activist among Christians. He recently shared a brief teaching about Jesus and his encounter with a Gentile woman from the book of Matthew. And it is here where we find out from him that Jesus is a racist.
Did you know that there's a part of the Gospel of Mark where Jesus uses a racial slur? In Mark chapter 7, there's the account of the Syrophoenician woman, a woman who is Syrian and Greek, both of which there were strong biases against within the Jewish community. And she comes to ask Jesus to heal her daughter who's possessed by a demon. And what is Jesus' response? He says, "It's not good for me to give the children's food," meaning the children of Israel's food, "to dogs." He calls her a dog. What's amazing about this account is that the woman doesn't back down. She speaks truth to power. She confronts Jesus and says, "Well, you can think that about me, but even dogs deserve the crumbs from the table." Her boldness and bravery to speak truth to power actually changes Jesus' mind. Jesus repents of his racism and extends healing to this woman's daughter. I love this story because it's a reminder that Jesus is human. He had prejudices and bias, and when confronted with it, he was willing to do his work. And this woman was willing to stand up and speak truth.
Jesus was a racist and repented of his sin to the woman? Well, I'll answer that blasphemous statement in a moment. But let's refer to what Mr. Robertson is talking about. And to do so, we will read that passage from the book of Matthew, chapter 21. Jesus went away from there and withdrew into the district of Tyre and Sidon. And a Canaanite woman from that region came out and began to cry out, saying, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is cruelly demon-possessed." But he did not answer her a word. And his disciples came and implored him, saying, "Send her away, because she keeps shouting at us." But he answered her and said, "I was only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and began to bow down before him, saying, "Lord, help me." And he answered and said, "It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she said, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs feed on the crumbs which falls from their master's table." Then Jesus said to her, "O woman, your faith is great. It shall be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed at once. Now let me emphasize that Mr. Robertson has taken this passage out of context and totally distorted it. For in Matthew chapter 15 and its parallel passage in Mark chapter 7, Jesus is both teaching his disciples and testing the faith of the Syrophoenician woman. Jesus makes it clear that his ministry was to the Jew first. But of course, the Jews ultimately rejected him. And in the book of Acts, we see that the church progressively shifted from reaching just the Jews to also reaching the Gentiles throughout the rest of the world with the gospel message. And it wouldn't have been right for Jesus to take the children's food and give it to their dogs? Well, contrary to what Robertson claims, the word that Jesus used was not a racial slur, but rather it was the word for pet dog in Greek. For Jews in Jesus' day often referred to Gentiles as dogs, as non-Jews were considered so unspiritual that even being in their presence could make one ceremonially unclean. But much of Jesus' ministry, however, involved turning expectations and prejudices on their heads. For Jesus' words with the woman are not designed to be harsh, unfeeling, or racist. In fact, he was tenderly drawing from her an expression of her faith. And in her response, the woman showed her incredible faith in acknowledging the nature of Jesus' ministry by asking that the crumbs be given to her. Therefore, Jesus honors her faith and heals her child. So notice, there was no racism here. For if Mr. Robertson were correct about Jesus using a racial slur and therefore sinning, what would that mean for all of us? Well, this example would implode for us with a nuclear force, rocking the very foundations of Christianity itself. For if Jesus had sinned, he would no longer be sinless or holy, but instead sinful. And therefore, Jesus would no longer be worthy of dying for our sin. In other words, he would have gone to the cross for absolutely nothing. And if no longer worthy of dying for our sins, he would also then not have risen from the dead to complete his victory over sin, Satan, and death itself. For it was the Apostle Paul who takes up this very point from here when saying in the book of 1 Corinthians, if there is no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. More than that, we are found to be false witnesses about God, for we have testified about God that he raised Christ from the dead, but he did not raise him if in fact the dead are not raised. And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile, you are still in your sins. So to break it down in a nutshell, if Christ did sin, you and I have no hope of salvation. And that would also mean that if Mr. Robertson is correct, he might as well take off his own collar, pack up his Bible, shut down his church, lock the door, and call it a day. For he would have nothing to preach to anyone, for the gospel itself would be made futile. So I can hear the questions right now with people saying, Ed, why did you bring this episode to us about all these terrible things, denouncing God and Jesus, and seeing them removed from our lives, our cultures, and our world? Well, the answer is twofold. First, to the believer in Jesus Christ. with the lack of conviction of Christians in the world today. I hope if they see this episode, it will make you angry, and with a holy and righteous anger, and that it would motivate you to boldly live for Jesus Christ in the sharing of the gospel to the lost, whoever they are that may be in your life, and to denounce sin and evil in all of its forms in society without apology, and to live honest and decent lives to the glory of Jesus' name. For as it says in the book of Romans chapter 6, so you also should consider yourselves to be dead to the power of sin and alive to God through Christ Jesus. Do not let sin control the way you live, and do not give in to sinful desires. Do not let any part of the body become an instrument of evil to serve sin. Instead, give yourselves completely to God, for you were dead, but now you have new life. So use your whole body as an instrument to do what is right for the glory of God. Sin is no longer your master, for you no longer live under the requirements of the law. Instead, you live under the freedom of God's grace. So as you take these words to heart, we must remember that as He was faithful to us, so must we be faithful to Him, even if it puts us in the fire with mankind. For even then, we can still rejoice because Jesus will be standing right beside us in the fire itself. And now to number 2, that being for those of you who do not know Jesus as Lord and Savior, I beg of you to use your common sense. For the reason that we see this war on Jesus in pop culture, our schools, our governments, and our courts, and even from other so-called Christian leaders in churches, well, it's because Jesus is who He says He is, the Son of God, God in the flesh, the way, the truth, and the life. For notice that no other religious leader, icon, or figure, regardless of faith-based system, is under attack today even close to that of Jesus. And it's all because of one specific enemy who is hell-bent literally on waging war against Jesus in looking to remove or at least repackage His name, His teachings, His life, His death, and His resurrection. And that would be Satan himself. And that is because he knows that Jesus is the key to spiritual grace, hope, freedom, liberty, the forgiveness of sins, unification, restoration, and sanctification. And as a result, eternal life in heaven with God. For I emphasize to you that every bit you believe in Jesus as the Son of God, so you also should believe in the devil, for he is real, and he is also hell-bent on your destruction. As it is God's word that tells us about his character, or lack thereof. When Jesus himself called out to the mat the religious leaders of his time, when saying in the book of John, "You are of your father, the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father." He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. Whenever he tells a lie, he speaks from his own nature because he is a liar and the father of lies. And Satan is hell-bent on God's destruction. For think about it. What would Satan's purpose be if not to demean, discredit, and disgrace the creator of the heavens and the earth, and to systematically destroy all that God has established and founded? And considering that Christ himself is at the center of Christianity, Satan is more than willing to give you a beautiful church that everyone in the world will revere, and to give you a false gospel based on a work salvation, so that he can keep you away from Jesus. For if he does, then he has won the day over all those who are duped and deceived by him. So please do not be fooled by the father of lies deceptions, which are growing larger in the world by the day. For if we are not following Jesus, then we are following the devil, whether we have knowledge of that fact or not, and whether we like it or not. For as Jesus himself said in the book of Matthew, "Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters." Now, although Satan might be the main culprit behind all of this, what happens to all those people I showed here tonight if they should not repent of this incredible blasphemy against God's Son? Well, I will pull no punches in sharing with you what the Word of God says. For in the book of Romans chapter 1, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their own righteousness suppress the truth. And in the book of Matthew chapter 10, Jesus himself said, and do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both the soul and body in hell. Yet the good news is that Jesus, the true Savior of the universe, your only hope for salvation, is calling you home to your Creator. For what does God's word say for all of you who do not know him? In the book of Acts, to open their eyes so they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God. Then they will receive forgiveness for their sins and be given a place among God's people who are set apart by faith in me. So how do you give yourself to God? By accepting Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, and therefore by repenting of your sins to the Lord, asking him for forgiveness of all that you have done, and for his grace and his mercy to be upon you all the remainder of your days, and that you will bow your knee and your life to Jesus from this moment on. So follow these instructions on the screen, and I assure you, your life will never be the same. You will then receive these promises from God that it was Jesus himself who shared with us from the book of Matthew. Blessed are the gentle, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. So make sure you receive these undeniable promises of God for yourself. And so, as for tonight's earlier question, can God be canceled? Well, let's hear what God himself has to say about that. For in the book of Isaiah, remember the former things long past, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, things which have not been done, saying, my plan will be established, and I will accomplish all my good pleasure. And as for Jesus, what did he say to encourage us? These things I have spoken to you, so that in me you may have peace. In the world you have tribulation, but take courage, for I have overcome the world. So please, I beg of you, do not delay and accept Jesus Christ today. So I know this was a hard-hitting, riveting, and disturbing episode for many of you. But let's remember that God is still ruling and reigning, and he is still on the throne, and he will always have the very last word. So with that said, as always, I'm going to give you a preview for next week's 35th episode. And it's going to be our second episode devoted specifically to Jesus, in which we will simply title it, Jesus Christ, Fact or Fiction. What's the story? So I can assure you, you will not want to miss next week's exciting and thrilling episode. So if you like this episode today, do me the favor as always and hit the thumbs up button on the episode down below to let me know you like the channel and the episode. It's critical to seeing this episode get out to the masses on YouTube. So please, please give me that thumbs up. Also, feel free to leave any comments or questions you have down below, and also leave any future episode topic ideas you would have for me to cover. And lastly, as always, please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so that you can stay up to date with all of the episodes of Appointed to Promote TV. And so, as we always do, we end our episode today with our signature Bible verse for the program from the book of Colossians, chapter 2, verse 8, which says, see to it that you are not held captive by philosophy and empty deception, according to the traditions of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Christ. So until I see you guys next time, God bless.